I was shocked when my best friend called. I was out of town to tell me that my husband had no idea what to do about his dinner.
Oh.
In this episode, we talk about leaving your loved one at home alone in the beginning. Sue, let's get started.
All right. Welcome. We're Sue Ryan
And Nancy Treaster.
This podcast brings our years of experience in a variety of family caregiving roles to prepare you to navigate your caregiving journey.
We're sharing our personal experiences, not medical advice. And because it's our passion to support you on your journey, we believe no topic is off limits.
We're bringing you practical tips
And candid conversations.
about the good, the bad, and
yes, the ugly.
in family caregiving.
Let's get started.
The number one thing that we're trying to do with our loved one and for us is to help them maintain their independence as long as possible, especially in the beginning of the journey with their diagnosis and our journey as caregivers. It's reasonable we're concerned because this is something we haven't dealt with before. And so to your point with your husband's dinner, periodically things are going to come up and we're like, wow. So one of the things we know is that this phase is temporary. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to maximize what their journey is, but it is temporary. It's not going to last throughout their journey. So the place that we're going to be talking about today is a variety of different tips in the areas of activities of daily living.
Right.
So that we're able to be looking for signs of how well they're able to manage on their own.
So just to expand on my dinner story,
Yes.
I was still working, still traveling out of town periodically overnight, and I would make pre-made dinners, put them in the freezer. I've been doing this for months. And my husband, who had been diagnosed with dementia, would get the meal out of the freezer and microwave it and eat his dinner. My best friend, who lived up the street, bless her heart, would come down every time when I was out of town, pretend she wanted to have a glass of wine with him, and just check to make sure that he successfully ate his dinner.
Sure. That's easy.
For some reason, we thought this was going to be a problem one day. Just part of it, right?
Right.
Knowing what's going to happen next.
Right.
And sure enough, I got the call. This phase is over. She got down there and he had no idea. She said, "Where's your dinner?" I don't even have any food. He had no idea there was any food, didn't know anything about the whole process.
This phase has passed.
This phase is done.
We're bringing you 6 tips to help you begin to know the different things to look at so that you're maximizing their independence as long as possible. It's also really important that we're minimizing our anxiety, because the other side of this is we want to help make sure we're keeping them safe. And yet if there are certain things that we're getting so anxious about, then even before it's time where they could maybe still handle it on their own, we may want to be getting them some support.
Right.
So the first tip that we're going to be starting with as it relates to activities of daily living is doing an audit. And the way I did the audit is I began tracking the changes and by keeping a notebook. And I would look through both with my dad and not as much with my grandmother, but with my dad and then with my husband is what are the different tasks they're doing? How well are they able to do it? Where are they struggling with it? And are they struggling today, but maybe the next day they're not struggling? And so when we're starting to see patterns and things, for example, we're going to list just a few different areas to monitor. A simple one, and especially if your loved one is not living at home with you, is are they able to do the laundry, which is washing it, drying it, putting away? How do they look? Are the clothes wrinkled? Are the clothes clean? If you go over to see, kind of check the laundry room. And then another one is cleaning products and how clean are they able to keep the house when you go over? How clean is the house? Really, really helpful is as soon as possible in the caregiving journey, especially whether you've got a loved one living at home or whether they're farther away, is replacing anything that could be harmful or hazardous with completely safe products. I've heard stories about where someone is cleaning the bathroom with products that are, hazardous. And that's not a safe thing. And then using them as hairspray.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that it's just not even a part of the equation.
Right. And then speaking of clean.
Yes.
are they keeping themselves clean?
Yeah.
Because that's an early sign that you find they really can't live at home alone anymore. They're not cleaning their clothes and they're not cleaning themselves.
Yeah.
And they're not cleaning their house.
And that's pretty easy to detect.
Yeah, you'll figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Also, safety around appliances.
Yeah.
So do you feel comfortable with them? They're not leaving the stove on or the oven on. And safety around appliances is critical.
Yeah. We had in a caregiver support meeting, one of the caregivers was talking about the fact that her husband had left the refrigerator door open all night long. And there are a variety of different stories we've heard. So it's just tracking those kinds of things.
Right. And that's the laundry list of things. And we'll put some of this in the show notes so you don't have to take this list. These are just the audit, right? Check on this, check on that. Can they do this?
And we're going to give you that list. But another one is locking and unlocking doors.
Sure.
And are they locking themselves out? Or are they not locking the doors and allowing other people to be able to come in? And then safety. Right. At a very high level. How safe are they around the house? Are they starting to bump into things? Are they tripping over rugs? So as you look around the house, you're going to be starting to become aware of things that you could be monitoring. One other thing that I heard in a support meeting is a woman who she was the mom and she always loved to iron. And one day the children came over and she had been ironing and she had left the iron on the ironing board face down.
Oh, my.
And really they said there's no reason the house didn't burn down.
Right. Well, thermostat control is another thing.
Oh, yeah.
Are they not really realizing what they're doing, jacking it up, jacking it down?
Yeah.
So having someone physically come check in part of the audit, is everything okay?
Sure.
So thermostat control is a problem.
When we do the audit, we're going to be able to figure out things that we can be doing about it. For example, you could replace a regular thermostat with something that's got a cover so they couldn't. But starting with the audit, because they may do it one time and not, or we're developing patterns. So we're really trying to figure out the different kinds of things. And there's a solution for everything. There's new technology for so many different things. We're going to put a lot of things in the show notes for you and give you the list of some of these things to be monitoring. So you've got some ideas about it. But it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So
Absolutely.
Nancy, what's the next tip?
Well, one more thing I'll add to the concept. Sure. We have put this in the show notes, but we also have a whole episode on overall safety.
Yes, we do.
Where we give a lot of solutions for some of the things that are safety oriented. So
good point.
So to me, audit number one, what is happening? What are they capable of doing? What do you need to be able to keep an eye on?
Right.
So know what things you're watching.
Sure.
But there's several things that are deal breakers. Mm-hmm. Can they feed themselves?
Yes.
Early sign of that is weight loss. Mm-hmm. If someone does not live with them on a regular basis, so you're not seeing it easily like I was or my friend was, is if you go to visit them or friends go to visit them, is there a significant weight loss that's unexplainable? Mm-hmm. Very common. Mm-hmm. I've got some friends that are really working hard to keep their father at home independently, but they realized he wasn't effectively grocery shopping and he wasn't really making his meals. Mm-hmm. But he could feed himself.
Okay.
So they have a weekly delivery from their local grocery store. They, one of the sisters lives in the same city, so she makes pre-made meals, puts them in the freezer like I did, and their father can still get them out and use them. Sure. And then periodically they'll have meals delivered. Mm-hmm. But they're controlling and making sure that the meals are being eaten and checking and auditing on a weekly basis is the food being eaten as well.
Which is great, yeah. Mm-hmm. And in your audit, one of the things to be auditing is things like the pantry and the refrigerator and freezer. Is the food stale? Is there and spoiled? Is there food in the refrigerator and in the freezer?
Right.
And,
is it even there?
Sure. We talk about food and being very important, and the other one that is equally as important on that, and it's also a deal breaker, is making sure they're staying hydrated.
That's right.
There are symptoms of dehydration that include urinary tract infections, and those are horrible. They're very common in seniors, especially if they've started developing incontinence, or like my dad. They just didn't want to go to the bathroom. They didn't want to be out in public. It was a challenge. And so he didn't want to drink because he didn't want to have the struggle. And what we did with my grandmother and my dad is we would get out the amount of drinks they had to have during the day in 8-ounce glasses so that every single day they knew how much they needed to drink. And we were monitoring both their food and their hydration.
That's really important.
Yeah. Well, our brains are about 80% water, so we better keep them liquid.
Very good point. So deal breaker is meals, food, and hydration.
Yes.
Second deal breaker, communication. Can they physically answer the phone?
Yeah.
Or use the phone to call 911 if they need to.
Yeah.
If they can't communicate to the outside world, they shouldn't be living alone.
And you can't communicate to them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
If the outside world can't get in or they can't get out, they shouldn't be living alone.
Absolutely.
That's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
A lot of people check that by having a regular phone call check-in every day, a regular text. One of my friends doesn't talk to her mother every day, but at the end of every night before she goes to bed, they have a text. And in the first thing in the morning, they have a text.
Yeah.
It's fine. You know, touching base is a great step.
Sure.
I would also highly suggest that you begin to introduce cameras, indoor and outdoor, and that you make sure those cameras have intercoms.
Yeah.
It is not uncommon, especially if they don't have a home phone, for them to forget to charge their phone.
Right.
And so an intercom gives you another way to communicate with them if their battery is dead.
Right.
And cameras, you don't have to make a huge deal out of we're putting cameras all over the house immediately kind of thing. You can introduce cameras with the agreement that we're going to put cameras in so that if we can't communicate with you, we can communicate through the intercom on the camera, or we can turn the cameras. They'll be off all the time. Only if we can't communicate with you will we turn the cameras on and look to see if everything's okay, and then use the intercom to try to communicate. Just getting the cameras in the door is 50% of the equation. You've crossed a huge bridge that way.
And a big tip with that is having it be about you.
Okay, good idea.
You know, it's when they want to maintain their own independence, you're like, okay, we want to make sure you're being safe. And to help us have peace of mind, we want to bring in the cameras so that because we can't be there all the time and you want to be home, let's have this as a trade-off that we'll do it so that we can have our peace of mind.
True. And when I say cameras on the inside, that's to check, obviously, if you can't communicate with them, have they fallen or is there something dramatically wrong? But cameras on the outside helps monitor, well, of course, if they go outside, but secondly, the kinds of people that are around the house.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a big thing too. Now I've got an outside story with cameras.
All right. Good.
One of my friend's moms wanted to have her independence, and she was living at home alone, and very, very social person. And she would see people. She had a big picture window in the front of the house.
Okay.
She would see people coming down the street, and she would go open the front door and wave at them and say, hi. She had a little house coat on. Do you want to come in and have a cup of tea? Do you want to come in for a visit?
Oh, no.
And my friend got a call one day and said, did you know your mom is, inviting people to come in and visit?
Off the street.
Off the street, So
Lovely.
at any rate, nothing bad happened. However, they immediately did put in the outside cameras.
Good.
And then they put in the inside cameras. So there are a lot of reasons for it.
All right. Well, that's scary, but I'm glad it turned out okay.
Yeah.
Third deal breaker.
Yes.
First, meals and hydration. Second, communication. Medication management.
Oh, yeah.
If they can't take their medication on their own while they're home alone,
Yes.
they can't live alone. So medication
Complete
management.
deal breaker. Yeah.
I will say, the same friends that have the groceries delivered to their dad, there's 3 of them, and they live on different time zones. And they have a check-in time. Their dad has both dementia and he has diabetes. And he needs to take medication 3 times a day.
Okay.
So each child has a time that they check in with dad and say, in the morning, Dad, have you taken your morning medication? It's not just the check-in that's critical, but where the medication is. The medication is in view of the camera so that they can watch him take his medication. Okay. So sometimes my friend says she'll call and say, Dad, did you take your lunch pills? And he said, oh, yeah. And she can watch him in the camera walk over to where the pills are, take his pills. But guess what? They are supporting his independence in an amazing way.
And he knows they are.
Yes. Oh, good point.
Yeah.
He knows they are.
He knows they are. So it's a partnership.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's other ways besides calling them, obviously. At least early on, there's, in today's world, so many different sophisticated medication dispensing technology.
Yes.
And
solutions. Trackers. Yeah.
That will, remind people on apps, remind more than one person, not just the person who needs to take the medication, but a caregiver that the medication needs to be taken, that the medication has been taken, or at least it's been opened.
Right.
So there's a lot of great technology helping with medication management. But if they can't manage them to take their medication, they can't live alone.
Deal breaker.
Deal breaker.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple more tips. The next one is tracking them for safety. And it's not just their safety. It's also, we're tracking it for our safety and for our anxiety and stuff. And so one of the things is tracking their driving ability. And we've got a whole podcast episode on driving. And yet in the very beginning, when they still have their independence and they still can be driving, one of the ways that we can very casually see how well they're driving without even bringing up taking away is ask them if you can ride along with them when they're going on an errand, and then go with them and then say, hey, on the way home, can we stop over here? So take them out of their normal routine. If they would normally just go to the grocery store and come back, say, could you run me over here? I need to drop something off here. Or I need to pick something up at the hardware store. Things like that to get them out of their routine and then see. There are a variety of different personal tracking devices. There are wearables, shoe inserts, GPS, all different kinds of things they can have. And you've got some things that...
Well, a friend of mine also bought her mom an Apple Watch.
Yep.
So that allows them to track where she is, which is awesome. But it also has a fall detection.
Okay.
So another example, there's a lot of multi-purpose devices out there that really help manage more than one challenge with leaving someone alone. And feeling, and like you said, reducing your anxiety and helping balance with their independence.
Balance their independence, which is really great. And now we come to the last tip.
All right, tip 6.
Tip 6, and this is huge, and that is creating a support team. And the support team is for them as well as for us. And especially if we're, whether our loved one is with us or away from home, and especially if they're away from home, we want to make sure that we've got a team of people that are available at different times of day. And they're available for different kinds of support. And that, for example, could they care for someone at night, and that they have access to, and again, I created the notebook.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I did. But what I wanted to do is...
Tell us about your notebook, Sue.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've told a lot of people about the notebook, and people laugh at me, but then they do it, because what I wanted to do is I'm thinking of my loved ones' independence. I'm also thinking of their safety. So what are the things that I can be doing to help have as many people available at different times of day or in different locations as possible for them as well as for me? What happens if something happens to me and I have to go to the hospital? Who could come step in?
Right.
Or if I have a loved one away from home. And so it's, what are their medication schedules? What are their dietary needs? What are the emergency procedures? Who are the backup people? And make sure that they've got everything that they can. Okay, and I will say I did go a little bit overboard. In case it was in a situation where the power went off, I did have a flash.
I don't mean to laugh.
I did have a flashlight there. However,
so the notebook has a little flashlight next to it, just in case the power was out.
Yeah, it did.
You are hilarious.
However, I'm trying to keep them as independent, and then also the final thing I did with the notebook is, of the people who I had listed on the team, I periodically checked in with them. And if there was a change or something, I gave them an update. So they all had a digital version of it, but I always kept a printed version in front. And it's really helpful because it helps for safety for them and for us.
Yeah.
So it's just a great way to do an audit and keep information.
And all those people either need keys to the house or some sort of a code. If you've got a digital way to get in the house,
Absolutely.
you can give different codes to different people. So it's easy to monitor. But that's important. If you've got a support team, something happens to you, or if, like my friends whose father lives in a different time zone, if something happens and they can't communicate with him, they've got a neighbor they can call who will walk over and see if you can figure out what's going on.
So our support teams are, whether we're local or long distance, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So let's summarize. Today we talked about leaving your care receiver or your loved one at home alone.
Right.
In the beginning, this is a temporary situation. They will not be able to live home alone forever. We offered 6 tips. They start with, I think they're sandwiched quite nicely, actually. They start with monitoring and auditing their activities of daily living, monitor them, audit them, and then monitor them. Keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
Deal breakers. Tip 2, food and hydration. Tip 3, communication. You communicate with them? Can they communicate with
Yeah.
you? Tip 4, medication management. Can they take their medication? Yes or no? If they can't, deal breaker. Tip 5, tracking their safety. If they're able to stay home alone, they're probably still driving. Do we know where they are? If we can't find them, where are they? Tracking their car and tracking their person.
Mm-hmm.
And then sandwiched on the other end is a support team, which I
Yes.
really think is a critical part of your team, because this is as much about managing your anxiety, because leaving someone with dementia at home alone can be a very unsettling situation. You want to make sure that you put yourself in the best possible position to minimize your anxiety. So these are our tips. If you have tips
Yes.
and you think others would benefit from them, we would love to have you share those on our Facebook page or Instagram page. You can link to that in the show notes. We also will put in the show notes different products that we discussed here in this podcast. And I'd love to leave you with this. We know that leaving them alone is temporary, and it's a lot of work to help continuously monitor the situation, but you'll be able to handle it. You'll get ahead of it, and you'll think through these things like we've discussed here. And in the end, you'll get through this situation just fine.
You will. Breathe. We've got you.